Hello and welcome to our faith discussion at Talk of Christ, Faith, Family, and Adventure. I am Steve Hunt, and today I am with Marty once again. We had a discussion several weeks ago, and welcome back, Marty. And I have enjoyed having you participate with the larger group discussions. And today, I think both of us are having just a little bit of technical difficulties. So hopefully this will work. And welcome to anybody who's watching. Marty, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time with you talking about where you're at in your faith journey right now. But also, I think you mentioned that you've been thinking lately about kind of being humble while standing for what you believe and some thoughts you've had on that. So why don't you just jump in and share whatever you're feeling like sharing at the moment.
Sweet. Okay, so I rewatched our last video and I feel bad for being all over the place. It's sometimes hard to describe stuff, but so I wanted to recap a little bit on where I was and then kind of finish and then maybe a little bit more precise, or not precise, but in a more summary kind of a way. But so it kind of all started with me doubting, but still having the desire to believe, which I don't think is very different from many members in the church. And then I was finally open and honest with my husband about it. And shortly after, I received a calling and I told my bishop, and I was open and honest with him, and he still wanted me to serve. And I was really excited about that. And I kind of had a spiritual high. And then I read Saints because it was on my back burner. We had a stake president in Colorado that said, hey, you guys should read Saints. Everybody should read it. And so it was just on my back burner. With my new spiritual high, I was kind of thinking, oh, I can be honest with where I'm at and still fully participate in the church, which kind of eliminated a lot of the fears I was having when I was doubting. And so
can I interrupt you with one question? Earlier, you said that you feel like that's not that different from where a lot of the members of the church are. And
at different points, right? Like a roller coaster, right?
Yeah. And I had the feeling during our last discussion that you felt that some of your doubts were unlike many members of the church. So do you feel like at that time you realized that many members of the church had similar feelings to you, or did you feel like it was kind of just you?
I felt like people go through moments like that. And I was stuck in a moment where I would have little like rays of light where I'd be like, oh, this is okay. I can handle this. But ultimately, it would always come back to that not feeling like I can be as confident as I felt like I should be able to be confident, like as confident as I should be. And like I said, even though you'll hear talks that will say, it's okay, you can lean on my faith, like Elder Holland had a talk like that, and I really liked it. But they always kind of end with and then you will someday get your own, like you don't have to rely on other people's, right? I mean, I feel like you learn that a lot in youth. Like as a youth, you learn that a lot. Don't rely on your parents, gain your own testimony, right? So I just felt like it was getting worse though. So in my case, it's not that I think when I talk like that, I don't think that's too foreign to members, I guess is what I mean. And I honestly believe there's another path that I could have taken and still been in the church and still been happy. The way I describe it is I feel like I had two paths I could take and they were both really hard. And I tried to take the less bad path and that's where I'm at. But it's not like it wasn't super clear, I guess. Is how I would describe it. And I can understand how someone following their intuitions might have taken a different path than me, I guess. I'm trying to, as our topic for today, I'm trying to have the humility to understand that someone else might have taken that different path and that was right for them. And it's really hard when you're trying to claim that you have like truth and you're like, well, how can there be two rights? So it's really hard. It's not like, I don't know, it's really hard to figure that out. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. And so anyways, so that's how, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah. Keep going with whatever the direction you wanted to take that thought in. I had stepped us back a second to
back to what you said. Yeah. So yeah, I would say with this new spiritual high, I was motivated to take this off the back burner and read it. And I, in my head, was thinking, oh, Saints will be a book that I can read and it'll strengthen my testimony, reading about the testimony of the saints. And I didn't, I realized that it was just history, and I didn't realize there were things I learned in there, and there were also things that were in my head that were like verified as true. Whereas in the past, I might have ran into it and just not worried about it and said, well, that might not even be true. And then I read Saints, and it was like, well, if the church is admitting to this, then obviously there's must be good reason to believe this. Anyway, I read so on the Gospel Library app, you can click on links to sources. And so I was clicking on the sources and reading the original sources. And as I did that, I don't know, I guess that I was a little disappointed. I felt like even Saints was coating some of the stuff. And so when I first started reading it, my husband read it with me. And because like right when I got into it, I was like, you need to read this with me. And so we were both reading it, not together, but at the same time. And let's see. So I would say that I kind of came to the conclusion in my head. I was like, okay, so if I'm learning new stuff now, and how do I know? What else do I not know? And so for the first time, I was like, okay, maybe I should go see what critical sources of the church. I mean, we're devoting our life to this. Maybe I should go see what they're even saying. And I talked to my husband about it. I was like, so if there's things that are not true, it should be easily debunked, right? And he's like, yeah. So I was like, okay, so is it okay to like go look at stuff that's critical of the church, or at least not published by the church, right? Not necessarily going out there. Go ahead.
I do want to jump in right there, though. Do you still feel like that's the case? Like if there's something that's not true, it should be easily debunked. Is that a truism?
Well,
I mean, what if we just don't know?
Yeah, that's fair. Something I would say, if it's something that's just an outright lie, I feel like you can come to your own conclusion of whether, like, is that an outright lie or is that good evidence or bad, right? Like
I mean, let's twist that around for just a second. Let's just assume.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I don't.
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I mean, let's twist that around for just a second. I mean, if we assume that the church isn't true, then it should be easily debunked, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can say, okay, here's this statement. I'm sorry to give you a little pushback on that, but I didn't want to let that pass by, that you can't just go out and say, all right, we're going to read everything, and if we find something that isn't true, we'll know. We'll be able to find some debunking evidence, because that assumes then that you and I have the ability to figure out everything that we read on the internet, whether it's true or not, very easily by looking for, debunking things. And maybe the church isn't true. Let's assume that for a second. And that's why there is so much evidence. But I just want to push back on that idea that everything that we read somewhere that's not true should be easily debunked. I think that lots of people follow untruths that are not so easily debunked, so. Anyway.
Yes, I know. I think I agree with you. I guess the thing was mostly like, if there's something that's an outright lie, I think you could get to the bottom of it, like an outright lie. And I think the fear, I was always very, very obedient, and I never looked really at anything about the church that wasn't published by the church. I really didn't look at anything. And so at the very least, I think that was personally, looking back, I feel like that was naive of me, especially as an adult with better critical thinking skills than, say, like a kid, like a teenager or something. Maybe that's good advice for a teenager when really don't have the time to sort out everything, right? So, but as far as being well-informed, it's like, really, it's interesting because, well, I'll give you mad, right? That I didn't know everything.
I think the main gist of your argument here is this, should we, to your husband, should we really be holding ourselves from reading some of these critical sources? Can we wade into them and examine them? And I will give you that point. And I agree that I don't think that, like you say, as adults, we should be so afraid of reading what's out there. And I was just commenting too that I don't think, though, that we can wade into it, assuming that our truth meter, whatever that is going to immediately let us know what things we read are true and what things we read are false. In fact, that's part of the struggle. That's right. So, all right, keep going. You said to him, let's read this. We should have, hopefully, let's read some of these other critical sources. And you started wading that way. And
I wouldn't even say I was out there looking for critical sources. I was out there looking for other information I may have not known, similar to things I learned in Saints that I did not know either, right? Like, it wasn't really, is there somewhere, like what is it that people are saying, right? And so I got onto Reddit, and it took me about 2 seconds before I saw a reference to the CES letter. And I read through that. Kevin, my husband, was still very much like sorting through, he was working on Saints, and I wouldn't say that he was finding things easy necessarily, but he was certainly still defending the church. I don't think he felt like he was finding reasons. For example, I'm trying to think of examples, like when the failed bank that is in Saints, he was like, well, maybe there is an okay reason for that. Like he was, I don't know how to quite describe it. Anyway, he was I'm trying to think of what I was even saying before that. Well, so as I got like, we were on the same page that if there's something on the internet, like that doesn't necessarily have to like cut our faith down, right? But when he read the CS letter, he was not convinced. Let's put it that way. He was not convinced by the CS letter. And not that I was convinced, but I did learn more things in there. I think I kind of had a shelf crashing moment when I read Elder Packer's, and I actually went to the original talk because it was the truth is not very useful talk. And I read the original talk to the CS department, and I was really disappointed in it because I felt like it was not transparent, and that crushed me. I felt like that crushed me. And I wanted to resign that day. And my husband was like, no, you're fine. And so, anyway.
What do you think of that talk right now?
I still have a lot of problems with it. Like, it's not that I don't see how I can't be charitable to that point of view. Because he talks a lot about in there, sometimes things are not useful in our day-to-day lives, right? Like I can understand that, especially if he firmly believes that the church is true. And from his point of view, all of these troublesome things, all they do is weaken faith, and faith is what they want to bolster in the CES department, then that makes sense. I guess it's just really hard when you have that teaching right next to don't look at outside sources either. And so when you put those two together, I find it really troublesome, and it just leads to some people not realizing what they're believing in, I guess.
Do you feel like President Packer's words in that talk represent kind of policy, doctrine, or otherwise the stance of the church, or his own opinion, or how does it seems like your response to the talk was one of, I want out of the church? That would indicate that you felt that he was speaking for the church, and he may think that he was speaking for the church, but is that what you got from that moment, that this is the church's position, that we should hide these things?
Given his position in the apostleship, yeah, that's definitely the impression that I took from it. Okay. So yeah, I'm
just exploring because, when I read things like that, I have a position that's kind of like, oh, okay, thanks for your opinion.
And I definitely didn't have that then. Yeah. And so that's why my belief, I never went through that nuanced. I don't know if nuance is offensive to believers, but I never went through that, like that like sorting through. And to me, I seriously remember having lessons where you're praying to find something for yourself. And it's not that you're praying to find out if the Book of Mormon is true or false. You're waiting and keep praying until you find out that it is true. It's not really that you're actually using that as a method to find out if it's false. Because I've never heard of a story at church where someone prayed and found out it was false. It's just, you're only hearing the positive of that. And I felt like that's how, I don't know, like, I feel like when you get to the bottom of the box of what I believed, and I don't want to push this on your belief or a lot of other believers that are able to, sort through the things. But for the belief that I had was most definitely at the bottom of the box. It was aligning my will to be with the correlation teachings of the church. Like, it was, to me, I'd have lessons about aligning my will with God, aligning my will with the Holy Ghost. And I felt like that was a good thing because that was objective truth or whatever. And when I really got to the bottom of that, what it really was aligning my will with what the church taught me to believe. So it wasn't, it's not as good in my light in the way that I look at it now. Obviously, but I understand that other people don't do that. And
I want to be clear that nothing about what I said was like, oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, nothing that I said was, oh, you should have looked at it this way or anything. I'm just kind of exploring because how you're sharing, oh, this is what I felt when I read this talk, is because you say I was crushed and I wanted to resign immediately. And so comparing it with when I have read that talk in the past and I look at it and go, and I just kind of am like, President Packer, why'd you say this? This is weird stuff, And so as opposed to feeling, and so it's different. It's interesting to me that we can have these different reactions coming from arguably similar backgrounds and similar beliefs in the church, that I might read something like this, that some people will feel crushed and feel betrayed and feel I have to leave now. And other people will feel, that was really weird of them to say. I don't believe that for a second, and be okay with it, and just say, I can, anyway. All right. So you read that and you said to your husband, your thoughts, and he said, hang on for a bit and
he
keep
said,
going.
Calm down. I think this is emotional. I think you should calm down. And I did calm down. So then I would say, so my husband is going on his own faith journey at the same time. And he found other things troublesome. He actually got to polygamy, and that's kind of what broke his shelf. He had a similar moment. I don't know, maybe you should have him on sometime, but he basically,
That would be great.
I think he described it like this. It's like, you hear a lot, well, who am I to say how God would or would not have restored his church, right? And then when he read about the Partridge Sisters and Saints, he looked into it a little bit more, and he used the Hales website, which was faithful. So he felt like that was safe. And when he got to the bottom of it, he just kind of said, I don't believe that God would have done this. And I feel like God would be mad at me for believing he would do this. And so he kind of flipped that on its head and just said, this doesn't make sense. And I think God would be, if I have to stand before God, he could say, who are you to say how I am teaching? And the other one would, and he started picturing God saying, I gave you a brain, why aren't you using it? Like, of course I wouldn't say that. So anyway, that's kind of where his shelf crash moment was. And it is kind of like a light switch, like where all of a sudden your loyalty is not with the church anymore. And so then we're left with our daughter that is going to be baptized in 2 months from then. And I am still in this calling, and he is in the elders quorum presidency. And so we were struggling with so we kept on going to church and trying to sort through it. Like, I don't know, I guess we had a short period of trying to be nuanced. Church was hard during that time. And the the baptism, we talked to the bishop. We were talking to him pretty regularly, and he was really kind, and we love him a lot. We felt bad for the stress we were probably giving him, but he was really kind to us. I was debating whether to get released from my calling or not, because I didn't feel like I could be, I felt almost dishonest by just having that calling. I think by having that calling, people assume you believe certain things. So I felt dishonest by even having that calling. And then the Young Women's president said that we were going to do a lesson on the restoration, and that was something I could not do. And I ended up asking to be released. My husband did the same week. And we just had a meeting with the bishop, and he said, well, if that's what you want to do, that's okay. We told him it was okay to tell people why. We didn't want people thinking of like rumors that we were like some way unworthy. It was so that we were worried about that a little bit, like just be honest with people. But he didn't really say anything to people. I think the only people that knew anything are the people that we told. And then we kept going to church until I think the week before COVID, everything shut down. We tried out a Presbyterian church. And then the week after that, everything shut down. So that kind of made it easy to just kind of disappear. It was really hard. Those last weeks we did go to church, though. I felt like I wanted to say things that I knew I shouldn't say. It was really hard. And then as church started ramping back up, the missionaries would call us for meetings, just like regular, like, they didn't realize where we were at. So they were like, hey, sister missionaries, can we come over and visit? And so I still had a hard time saying no. I still wanted to be a part of the Word family. I wanted to be friendly. The kids were still going to activities when they had Zoom activities and stuff during COVID. And we still liked, the kids still enjoyed doing the activities and stuff. So, and it was really hard finding that balance. We got called to say the prayer at church, and Kevin's like, I don't think you want us to say that. So anyway, we ended up resigning just to like give a clear of where we were. And when we talked to the bishop, we told him, we still want to be invited to stuff. If you want to invite us, we're never going to be mad if you want to include us and stuff, but we need this for closure. And so anyway, that's kind of where we're at now. Like we went to a word activity, just a primary activity just this week. And it was like some water activity. We walking distance to the church. We just walked over and the kids were over there playing and stuff. So anyways, that is where we're at.
So what do you share with your daughter then? And yeah.
Oh, so, well, when she wanted to be the 8-year-old that wanted to be baptized. So we have one that's older too.
Okay.
And she's just kind of gone through her whole thing. She, I don't know, I think when we talk to her, I feel like she's saying what she wants, what we want her to hear. I don't know that she has her own, I think when we first started talking about it, I remember one of our daughters, I can't remember which one, saying, I'm worried that we're going to leave the church. They were scared that we were going to leave the church. And that like broke my heart. It's like, oh, because that's what you do learn at church, like leaving the church is bad. And I didn't want to be a disappointment to her. But as, you know, going through COVID and stuff like that and just having more time to talk about it, and they overhear our conversations, we're really not protecting them from them. And so they kind of know what we think. My 9-year-old, on the other hand, is a little, she still believes, and I wanted to support her. I wanted to let her know I still support her if she wants to believe. And I was talking to her the other day, and I was asking her about prayer and how she prays and stuff. And she's like, well, sometimes I pray for ice powers. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, does it work? And she's like, no. Like, I guess I forget, like, I think belief, they don't have to believe like me, and I want them to be free thinkers, but I also still have that protection. Like it's just like when I was believing, I want to protect them from believing wrong things, you know? And so I still want to protect them from not being, I don't know how to describe it, but I still have that want for them to be protected and stuff. And so it's a hard balance, because I feel like I was like, I was pushed into my kind of narrow-mindedness beliefs. I don't want to blame it on the church, but I feel like I grew up in a pretty relaxed home. But I feel like through Young Women and through Institute and seminary, I kind of gained what I should be doing, and I became a little bit more strict, a little bit more scrupulous. And it wasn't really coming from my family. And so I was like, even if I let my kids go to church still and stuff and be involved, I didn't want that to happen to them. So anyway.
So looking back at some of these historical events that you discovered that were difficult for you and your husband, do you feel, and just, you can speak just for yourself if you don't want to speak for him, which I approve of, do you feel that it was more challenging for you and your faith in Christ and in the church and whatever, to learn about the events of the past and some of the things that happened historically, or to know about those events, or to actually learn about those events later and realize that they had somehow been hidden from you, or that you were unaware of them? Like, which is more devastating, or is it equally a challenge for you? Like, if you had known about those things all along, do you feel like things would have been different? Or is it that if you'd known about them all along, that you would have left much earlier? Because you see what I'm saying? Is it the events, or is it the hiding?
I'm going to give two answers. I'm going to say, I think it is the hiding that hurt. It's that I felt like I was, I felt like I was taught the whole story. I got the impression I was taught the whole story. And then I found out I was not taught the whole story. And that felt like, in some way, whether I understand, I don't think I was outright lied to, but I do feel like there was a set of information that was being kept from me. And so, but like I said, if I go back like 10 years, I kind of saw this information on Wikipedia, and then I closed Wikipedia and never looked at it again. So I wouldn't say, it makes sense to me that some people can read this and still stay. Now here's my second answer from my perspective. I understand this is not going to resonate with probably someone on the faithful side, but from my perspective, what happened is, because I was not inoculated, I feel like it allowed me to step out of my belief system, and it allowed me to look at it and say, is there a good reason to believe this one over this one, over this one, over this one? Like, of all the belief systems out there, why is this one more special? Is it just because I was raised in it? Is that the only reason I'm staying in it? And when I felt like, when I stepped out, that's what I saw. Like, there wasn't a good enough reason to give my loyalty to the church, because it's a good church. Like, other churches are good, but I could not, those pillars of faith that keep the group together, I could no longer say that, yeah, I think those are special and I believe those. Like, really, ultimately, as I took a step outside, I was already grappling with doubt, right, before I even came into this area. But I still felt like, even during that time, I wanted the church to be true, and I had a desire for that to be my meaning and purpose. And so I still had the faith to stay. And I think as I stepped out, I was trying to decide whether that faith was worth having. Like, does that kind of help? So there's kind of two, but yeah, so go ahead.
Well, it sounded to me like the bigger issue, and the one that hits closer to home and crushed you the most, was the hiding. And at the same time, you feel like you were a little bit able to evaluate the truth claims of the church compared with other organizations and religions. And so when you were evaluating like that, where did you settle with your faith and beliefs, as far as religion, as far as Christianity? What do you believe now about God, Christ, and let's say even Joseph Smith? What's your position on those things?
I feel like I am definitely like in an agnostic camp. I think when you hear agnostics talk, I think that they resonate. What they're saying makes sense. There is like that camp of people usually is a little bit more bitter toward all religion in general. They think it's all about power. I have a feeling that I don't have that belief. In fact, when I was telling my husband, I have more in common with believers in God than I do with not believers in God. As soon as all of those believers in God can come to a conclusion of what God is, then I think I'll agree with them. Like that's kind of, I really don't know how to describe it because as far as like Christ, I definitely don't have that same reverence that I used to around like that sacrifice he literally made for me, and I had a lot of reverence. Like favorite song was what is that? It starts with, I can't think of it anymore. I Stand All Amazed was one of my favorite songs. So I don't have that reverence around that anymore, but I still have a lot of respect for, I understand, it makes sense to me how religion gives you meaning and purpose in life. I have a lot of sympathy for that. And yeah, I don't know.
Do you feel like you have some meaning and purpose
Joseph
right
Smith,
now?
I feel like,
Oh yeah,
Joseph
sorry,
Smith,
go ahead.
I feel like, I was trying to go back what you were asking. So Joseph Smith, I feel like, I think he really believed it. I don't think he could have come up with it without really believing it, but sincerity and belief doesn't mean it was actually true, kind of where I'm at on that.
So you don't feel like he was maliciously deceitful and evil. You feel like he was somehow himself deceived and leading others the way he believed.
So as I was going through all of this, I read Rough Stone Rolling. I really like Richard Bushman's take on it. I don't feel like he was unfair. In fact, I can actually resonate a lot with some of Joseph Smith's writings right there at the beginning, just of this. He is trying to figure out which church is true. I feel that. Like I totally, when he's writing a lot of those things, like one of my favorite quotes that I like to tell members that I have is he basically said, I don't like how the Methodist says that you have to follow the creed, right? And I feel like that's how Mormonism has evolved to, like you have to follow this set creed or else you're out. And he was actually fighting against that earlier, right? And so when he says that, I replace Methodist with LDS, and it's like, yeah, I totally don't know what you mean, Joseph Smith. So I don't know. I do think he believed in the supernatural. I think he believed God was talking to him. I don't have that confidence level, so I'm not going to start my own church. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's a very charitable position that you're holding. I mean, it sounds to me like what you're saying is you believe that Joseph believed what he was doing was right, and you believe that Joseph believed he was talking to God. And so, but it not enough that you believe that he actually was, right?
Right.
Okay. And I think it's interesting too. You've mentioned twice now this creed. You just said it in the last couple of minutes that Mormonism holds to, that you feel like it's a little bit like the Methodists of Joseph's time, and that people need to believe the same things to stay in. And then a few minutes before that, you had said, I realized I could no longer, support the pillars or whatever. I'm interested to know what that is and means. I mean, I have kind of, and I've mentioned in other videos here on this channel, my like 5 things that I say that I choose to believe and that I support. And they sound pretty similar to what lots of Latter-day Saints might say that they believe. And at the same time, as you've used the word nuanced, I'm okay with that word. My beliefs are very nuanced, and there are many things that I don't know. And when I really start to explain my personal beliefs about God and about Joseph Smith and about the church, sometimes, as I mentioned last week, I'll get somebody who says, you don't sound like you're Mormon to me. And I'm kind of like, who are you to tell me what? Yeah, what does that mean? Where, so I'm wondering what you believe it means to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and where you decided that these are the things I could no longer believe, and so I had to leave? What was that line for you that indicates this is what Latter-day Saints believe, and I don't believe that anymore?
I think I had a really strong belief that I think it kind of goes to transparency a little bit. Like I don't know if there are things that you feel like you can't say when you're in a church meeting. Are there things where you feel like, because you say you have different beliefs, but are there a set of beliefs that you don't say at church? I'm just curious.
If anybody pressed me on my beliefs, I
can't feel like you have to lie.
Yeah, I know. Say that again.
You wouldn't feel like you had to have to like lie or anything, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know that there are things that I have said over the pulpit that probably make some people uncomfortable. I know that I try to press sometimes. I'm the kind of person who, if I'm lucky enough to attend gospel doctrine, right now I'm actually in the nursery, where I get to really feed impressionable minds. Just kidding. They're just so small. But if I have the opportunity to contradict someone that I feel is perhaps hindering the progress of truth, I will try to speak up, and I'll say, do we really know that? Is that something, and I'll make more questions than answers. See, I never feel like I can't say what I believe, because the fact is I have a lot of questions. So when I say, quote unquote, what I believe, what I'm really doing is asking questions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so there's nothing that I would have to hide. And if somebody did say, wait, tell us more about this thought or this process or this belief that you have, many times I would say, well, I'm just wondering if it couldn't be like this, and maybe it's like this, and I have no idea, but it might be like this. And I would be happy to say all of those things in church. If that answers your question about, I don't feel like there's anything I have to hide, but I don't just come right out and start spilling everything constantly. I wait for the right moment. So.
Yeah. Well, I kind of put it like this. One of the things that the sister missionaries asked us when they came over to our house, they gave us the lesson on the restoration, the cute little lesson. The sisters were awesome. They were like, Nielsen's, how can you do this? Anyway, so they were extremely awesome. Like, I know we have a lot of, we love the missionaries, and they have a hard life, and so we want to support them. But they said, how's the restoration blessed your life? We honestly couldn't answer that in an honest way. And so when you're, or not in a faith promoting way, like, I guess when you go to church, you're supposed to support the faith, right? And we're not able to do that anymore. And so I guess that's why you go to the, in fact, we were actually holding out. I remember we were holding out for the April 2020 conference, and we're just like, and in my head, I'm thinking they're going to come out and they're going to correct all this stuff. They're going to go over the pulpit and they're going to say, hey, the first vision, maybe we shouldn't be as confident about the first vision. I seriously, in my head, I wanted to stay in the church. I wanted to be a part of them still. And I needed them to be more transparent, is really the core of what I needed them to do in order to feel honest about staying. And I don't know if you remember the April 2020 conference. That's where they kind of, it was 200th, I think, anniversary of the first vision. And so they made a new proclamation about the first vision, I think, or the restoration, Joseph Smith. Anyway, so to me, that felt like the opposite of what I needed. And I was just like, like, I can't, like, it almost felt like an answer to, I wouldn't say I was like praying or anything. I was hoping, and it was definitely a disappointment for me, but I don't know what makes me think I'm special. People have been going through this since Sandra Tanner, like, people have been going through this for a really, really long time. I'm not sure why I thought when I found it out, all of a sudden the church was going to change their beliefs with mine.
So, I mean, earlier you mentioned that you feel that Joseph Smith truly believed he was talking to God and that he had divine interaction. So Joseph, I take from that, you feel he truly believed he had a first vision. And would you?
Well, I would say this. I would say I do believe that he This one is hard because as far as the first vision goes, I believe humans are really good at supporting what they already believe. And this includes me. I'm not putting me outside of this. Like, I feel like we are very good at supporting
our own biases
and justifying our current beliefs. And so
well, we have to. If we walked around all day, every day, just destroying our own beliefs and tearing down our life and rebuilding it, we couldn't even we couldn't lead a good life. Keep going.
Well, as far as Joseph being good intentioned, I feel like he may have been good intentioned. There are some cryptic quotes he has where he says he sinned in some way. I don't know. I can't remember if it was in the Doctrine and Covenants or if it was. I remember.
Well, he talks about some of his sins in the Pearl of Great Price, and
yeah,
of course,
I think
multiple times the Lord chastises him for sins in the Doctrine and Covenants.
And that makes me curious what he's referring to, because I have wondered. I wonder if he had made something up for the work or something, and that's what he was repenting. I have wondered that, because there are things that I don't understand how. I don't understand how you can give Joseph Smith a 100% pass on he really believed it, and he actually did not find gold plates. So, like, there is a contradiction there, and I don't know how to sort that out, because I don't believe that he had physical gold plates, but I don't know if he had like a spiritual mindset where he felt like God made them that way. I don't know how he could have truly believed it and there not actually been gold plates. Does that make sense? So I struggle with, but as for the most part, I think, I guess what I'll do is I'll give him like a 90% pass on like trying to do the right thing. And I think there may have been a little bit of some mischievous things where if he had been 100% honest, saints would have been disappointed. I actually have a very good example of this. So he kept polygamy a secret from the membership of the church back then. That's one of the things I learned in Saints that I did not know. I feel like had he been upfront and honest about that part, there would have been some disappointment there. And I wonder if there would have been some disappointment in the revelation process and stuff that people would have been disappointed with if he had let us know what it was. Because really, ultimately, he said it was by the power of God. We don't know anything really from Joseph Smith, how he translated, for instance, the Book of Mormon. And so I wasn't there. I don't know. And so I'll try to give him the benefit of the doubt unless I have proof otherwise, I guess, maybe. Does that answer that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean,
first vision. Here's where I go on the first vision. So as I've gotten older, I understand that the best record is the first one, right? And so I guess I'm not saying the church has to disavow the first vision. I am a little disappointed that they use the later version as the scripture version and not try to integrate them at least, or just try to let you know that there are more, like just something there. Because like I remember watching something on just about how bad people are at recalling things. And so the best time to interview a witness is right away and not later, because then they start filling in the blanks with different things that they might hear from other people. And so so the first account of the first vision, I would think we should use, does that help with why I have a hard time with the first vision? It's not necessarily that I don't think it happened, but or I don't think that people feel that it's scripture. I don't know if that I don't know. That's a whole other discussion of itself, right?
So, and then what about, again, back to other things? I'm just in all of this, just kind of feeling out where you're at in faith and the Bible, Christianity.
Yeah, I think there's ancient wisdom, right? So I believe that there's a lot of ancient wisdom. That's why it survived so long. And I feel like the reason Mormonism has survived so long is because there's obviously some truths in there. I was reading in the Book of Mormon the other day, and I was like, oh man, this is a cool scripture. That is kind of amazing that he came up with this. Like, that is amazing. And there's other parts in the Book of Mormon where I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, I can see how he could have written that. So it's not like, I don't know, that you don't have both sides of this skeptic, faithful, kind of like, oh, this is good. And then obviously, oh, I can see how he could have done that.
So there's some wisdom in the Bible that's
even the Book of Mormon, I'd say, yeah.
In the Book of Mormon that has been retained. But you're, as far as a divine source, are you feeling that there's any divinity there, or just humans making up human things?
Well, that's tough, because it depends on what you think like divinity is. Like, I think a lot of times people do have like a kind of a different view of God, where it's less directed and less like singular, but it's more group. And I do have a lot of respect for humanity and stuff like that. It's so hard to describe it. I don't know. I guess I am very humbled in what I don't know. And so I don't want to try to claim that I know that there is no God. But I wonder if over time, God has been a little bit too narrowly defined. So I still feel like there's divinity there. Like, that word still has meaning to me, but I wouldn't say that it's coming from a God with a body of flesh and bones, like the doctrine. Like, I definitely don't believe that, but I still feel like there is and beauty in trying to find truth, I guess. And I still consider myself a truth seeker, but I don't know what that is. I don't think anybody does, and that's the journey, right? To try to figure out what that is. So, yeah.
So as you're, I mean, you just mentioned a second ago this humility that you have in not knowing and not saying, you know, whether there is or is not a God. Would you touch on that, this feeling that you've had kind of recently about the humility and standing up for your beliefs while being humble, and what have been your thoughts there? You mentioned maybe some discussions you'd had with other people, and anyway.
Yeah, so I can give you just a quick, so it's interesting when you're looking through the lens of two completely different belief systems, how it's really hard to stand up for what you believe and at the same time not crush someone else in their beliefs, right? So I'm trying to decide whether I should give like specific quotes from the conversation or not. But there has been a specific conversation in my mind. And I was encouraged to not be prideful and to basically come back to the church. And I've been thinking about that, and it's just like, from my point of view, this other person also needs to be humble to even see my point of view, because I felt like they're blinded by their own belief too, right? And so it's interesting that we're looking at each other almost like a mirror, and it's really hard, but at the same time, it's hard not saying things that are hurtful, right? Because it's like, from certain perspectives, I can't even be finding truth because truth is defined by God. And so I can't even be a truth seeker, right? Even though I feel very strongly that I am searching for the truth, even though I can't. So I don't know. It's and so I've wondered a lot. Like, I came to the conclusion, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know what you think here. I came to the conclusion that when you're looking at scriptures, like about pride, it's safer to not aim it at somebody else, but to aim it at yourself. And so instead of me thinking, oh, this other person must be so prideful in their own belief, well, maybe I will look and what can I learn from them instead? And whenever you're reading about pride, if you're thinking about another group of people or somebody that's not you, I think that might be your number one sign that you might be too prideful. So I shouldn't do that. I hope nobody else does.
I would jump right on board with that. I would jump right on board with that and say, if you're reading any scripture about any sin or focus or whatever, and you're thinking about some other group and saying, oh, they really need to hear this. Just about any time that I'm thinking that, that's a sign that I'm judging that person, and I'm saying, hey, you need to wake up to what I believe, and you need to, again, I'm judging you for your beliefs, and as far as I can tell, any kind of judgment or condemnation is not my place to make that kind of judgment or condemnation on somebody else, and that I get to pull the mote from my own eye, excuse me, the beam from my own eye before I pull the mote from somebody else's. So,
right.
So I'm on board with that idea about,
So that's how I would, that's how I've been trying to think about it, instead of being hurt or anything, just say, well, there's probably truth to it. And so how about I do try to see what I can learn from someone else's point of view, I guess.
I mean,
I think those scriptures in general, I think that's when they're most useful, is when we aim them at ourselves and we try to perfect ourselves. I don't think you're very good at perfecting other people by telling them they're wrong, right? So
absolutely. I mean, my own personal belief is that we are to work out our own salvation and find the truth through a personal relationship with God, as we reach out to him, as we reach out to his word and study the scriptures and seek the Holy Spirit, that it needs to be something that we are doing for ourselves, to improve ourselves, to grow closer to God, and not so that we can wield it as some kind of a baseball bat to smack other people. And, we started, or just before we started this conversation, you and I were talking about this idea of a religion of one, and that's come up on this channel before, that essentially you and me and everybody on this channel and everybody you run into at church, none of us holds the exact same set of beliefs. You could find any two Latter-day Saints, any two Methodists, any two Presbyterians, any two, Muslims, and ask them a series of questions, and sure, they might get fairly close to each other in the party line belief about what they're supposed to say. But when you really press them, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about this? I think that you'll always find some difference between those two people on how they view God and what their relationship with God is and what they believe about God. And so you end up with each person walking around with kind of their own private spirituality, if not private religion. And the question is that we've touched on this channel, and I think we need to maybe spend some more time on it, is when do you decide that your spirituality, your religion, can no longer hang with the rest of this group that you like hanging out with on Sundays and some weeknights and whatever, and with your neighbors? When do you decide that, okay, I have enough of a difference of beliefs that I have to go somewhere else? Do you have any final thoughts on that kind of a question as to what you think makes that moment in somebody's life?
I think it kind of depends on what your reason for being there is. So if your reason is because it's true, which is what it was for me and my husband, we're very engineering types, by the way. We were there because it was true. We weren't there because it was pragmatically true. It's because it was actually true. And so once we lost that, well, we don't think it's actually true anymore. That was what our breaking point was. And then we tried to navigate, maybe it's pragmatically true for a little while. It was very short. And ultimately we didn't. I think some people stay for the community. And I guess when that community is no longer fulfilling for them, they might leave for that reason. Like, I think you hear people, oh, they left because they were offended. Well, maybe that's the only reason they were staying, is for the community. And if they weren't there for the belief, then maybe that's why they left. I don't know that that's really actually that common. That might be, I think what that is it's a breaking point for people. I don't think it's why they leave. It's just they were staying for a smaller set of reasons. And then, I think some people are there because it's their family, it's their culture, and they like it, and so they stay. I don't know. I think it just depends on why you're really there. Maybe.
That's an interesting, response, and it made me question myself. And so why am I in church? Am I there because I believe that it's really 100% true and truth claims? And the interesting thing is that I am generally willing to to go with most of the truth claims and to shrug for a lot of them and say, I don't know, it's not that important to me if they are or if they aren't. And I as I've said here, I have a few things that I really believe. It has to do with that I'm a child of God, I'm a son of God, that we're children of God, that we're divine, that he loves us. It has to do with that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of the world and the only name by which we can be saved. It has to do with that the Word of God is truth. Truth is the Word of God, that Mormonism is all truth wherever it's found. And so that would include the truth that's found in the Book of Mormon in the Bible, and the truth that's found elsewhere is all part of what I believe, and so, and then it includes that, that there are people with the keys of the priesthood, the right to oversee the church, and those keys are held by the first presidency. And I do believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet. So there I've kind of stated my beliefs, and then almost everything else would be hills I'm not willing to die on. Things that I would, from the things that I personally believe that other Latter-day Saints might say, whoa, that's weird, to the things that I believe that are right in line with what other Latter-day Saints, I feel like, I could be right, I could be wrong. One of the things, for instance, that I, over the years, decades really, have kind of taken a position on is this idea that when Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came in the flesh, he told a whole bunch of stories. He told a bunch of parables. They're in the Bible. Here we have God, a being that I believe is divine, telling a bunch of stories about a Samaritan and about a Lazarus, talking to God and Abraham's bosom, and I'm talking about all the kinds of parables that Jesus told, the prodigal son, and we don't assume that these were truth claims that Jesus was making in the moment when he told the story about a man who went down from Jerusalem, that he was talking about a literal person who was literally helped by a literal good Samaritan. He was telling a story. And so if God can do a whole bunch of teaching of truths with a whole bunch of stories, then my belief ends up being, well, then I'm totally okay with the possibility that the Bible and the Book of Mormon is a collection of stories told by God, because God apparently gives us truth with a bunch of stories. And I'm not saying that the Book of Mormon isn't literally true, or that the Bible isn't literally true, but it's this moment of I'm good either way, because God can tell stories, and the same could be with so many of our other stories. I don't know. Anyway,
I actually want to just say one quick thing, because I wonder, when it really comes down to it, I'm not sure humans are capable of knowing ultimate everything, right? Like ultimate knowing how, let's say, God exists, how God works. We may not even be capable of understanding that. So I do have this wonder, something I'm toying with thoughts. Maybe we are better suited for narratives and not for actual literal truth. Like if that's what we're designed for, and I don't know if you believe in evolution or not, but if that's how we've evolved and that's how we have been able to learn and grow is through narratives, I wonder if that's closer to the real truth than our more scientific way of knowing things, or at least that's a part of it. And you need that part, that spiritual aspect or that story part of it. It's interesting. I can watch a movie or something and be so moved by it. And that might be necessary for us, I guess. I have that wonder.
And I agree with that. In fact, I was going to comment just before you got into movies, I was going to say, and it's an interesting thing that when we do watch movies or read a story, we're reading a very short, edited version of one person's telling of some set of events. And that is the same as true on a movie, when the truth, whatever that is, would be 100 different people who were involved or who were tangentially, part of it, telling their versions of what happened. Some of them it affected greatly, some it didn't. And so really, if you could know the truth, like you just said, we can't download all of that. We can't get every point of view. We can't, we just get one little narrative of every single event that ever happened. And maybe we'll get another version, another witness, and that'll give us some more insight, but we're never going to get the full story and the full truth, like you just said. And scientifically, science likes to try to boil all of those truths down to a mathematical equation, and just say, this is how it is. It doesn't matter from what direction you look at it, 2 + 2 = 4. And there's some areas where that kind of truth is very helpful. And then other times you can't boil the event down to a mathematical equation, and so it just, anyway. Well, Marti, it has been a real pleasure continuing our discussion. And I just want to thank you for being here. So
yeah,
you have a great,
I appreciate you guys
all right,
having me. Thanks.
see ya.